I think we sometimes overfocus on the food part and forget how many other things nursing is, right? Or even if we're talking about bottle feeding, how many things feeding with responsive, like love and connection is, regardless of the vehicle, right? Like, yes, it's calories, but it is also thirst. It's sensory, it's connection, it's co-regulation, and it's not just about calories and whether or not a baby will fall off the growth curve.
Welcome to the Baby Sleep Connection, a podcast that explores baby sleep and more through the lens of attachment and development. I'm your host, Heather Boyd. I'm a mom of 3, an occupational therapist, and a certified infant and family sleep specialist. If you are a tired parent who wants to support your baby sleep holistically, keep listening as we delve into approaches that go well beyond the usual strategies of wake windows and bedtime routines. Your baby's sleep is connected with so much more. Hello, and welcome back to the Baby Sleep Connection podcast. I'm your host, Heather Boyd, and I'm very excited to have a guest on today, internationally board certified lactation consultant and sleep coach, Kimberly Hawley. Kim, it's so good to talk with you today.
So good to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. I was on your podcast, I don't know how long ago, so I'm so excited that it gets to work the other direction too. This is going to be awesome.
I love it. I love it. So much fun.
I wonder if you could start by introducing yourself. Tell us a little bit about you and who you serve.
Yeah. So like you said, I am a lactation consultant and a holistic sleep coach. And I'm in DC, so I'm in the States. Though I see clients mostly, I'd say nationally in the US, but internationally as well. And I mean, much like you, right? I work with families who are looking for attachment-based and developmentally informed ways to support family sleep. And for me, a big focus is definitely with nursing families, nursing babies, nursing toddlers, just because a lot of folks will reach out to me because I really want that lactation and holistic responsive sleep brought together. But of course, not all my families are nursing families, but a good portion are.
Right. Well, and we're going to tap into that knowledge today. And I feel like you and I both work from a very similar frame. You through the IBCLC lens, I suppose, but still the same foundation of attachment and development of sleep. And I'm more through that OT lens. So one of the topics that has been a hot topic for many of the clients that I've been seeing this year, I feel like it's this major theme of 2024, is getting guidance around night weaning. And of course, you and I know there are ties with sleeping, there are ties with attachment. We're going to do a deep dive today, but I want to start by asking you, when it comes to parents who are exhausted, who are trying to navigate sleep development through that attachment lens, where does nursing fit into that on a grand scale?
Yeah, it's interesting because nursing and sleep are really interconnected. I'm sure you're familiar, but maybe some of your listeners aren't, with the concept of breast sleeping, right? Coined by James McKenna, which is just so when parents and babies sleep near each other, and nursing parents and babies, it's part of this whole integrated system of shared sleep, feeding, sleep, feeding, synchronizing of sleep cycles and sleep states. And it can really be quite lovely. That being said, it is on an individual level, very family to family, right? How families are coping with what's happening with nursing and sleep. But big picture, nursing to sleep is normal. Night feeds are normal. And when they're not feeling sustainable, it's not a night wean or do nothing, right? There's so much, as you know, so much in between letting your baby or your toddler nurse all night long as much as they want. That's one end. And then, fully night weaning, it's a whole continuum.
Mm. Well, and when you're talking about this natural connection between nursing and sleep, and that variation that you can have, this whole huge middle ground between totally baby-led and keep carrying on versus night wean and hope that it solves all our challenges. What are the common questions I get from parents who are starting to see that something has to give, something needs to change to make family life easier, to make quality of sleep easier? And the question they always ask me is, what age should I night wean? Like, quote unquote, should I night wean? And I know you and I probably both have the same perspective on the word should when it comes to making these decisions. Tell me more about what your perspectives are on that question and how to support families in figuring out when, quote unquote, should they night wean.
Yeah. So for me, it starts with why they want to night wean, right? Because I feel like there's so many sort of false promises that, like you alluded to, night weaning is going to solve all of their problems that are not true in a lot of cases. And we can definitely talk more about that. So it's like, what are you hoping that night weaning will do for you? And is your baby or toddler ready to night wean? And so you don't ever have to night wean, right? Like for a lot of kiddos, those feeds will just organically phase out, right? And yeah, it's also okay to want to night wean, right? There's a lot of buzz around 18 months being an age that is easier to night wean after because language is more developed. And so we have more tools in our, that we can use to support kiddos and have more understanding. Personally, I feel like if we are weaning off nursing under a year, then we probably should be thinking about replacing that with bottles, at least a feed, right? Like I'm not a huge fan of taking all night feeds away from a baby under a year. I think that's one thing if they do them themselves, another thing for us to decide that as parents or sleep coaches or, professionals. But I don't think there are hard and fast rules because there are 18-month-olds that are totally not ready for night weaning who are highly sensitive. And there are, 15-month-olds that can night wean without a lot of fuss. So there's a lot of in there that has to do with temperament and what role nursing plays for them and how strong that attachment is to nursing as one of their co-regulation tools.
Well, and I think I felt a collective sigh of relief when you were giving these timelines because of that pressure around the should and around when it should happen, the messages parents are getting about when this should happen. I know for most of the parents listening, they've already moved well past both psychologically and in time in the age of their kids, past that 6-month mark that would have been traditionally or and maybe still in some circles, especially around physician guidelines around this, that after 6 months, it's not necessary. Your baby can get through the night without feeds. And although most of the listeners are probably very comfortable with this idea of continuing to feed through the night past 6 months, can you just touch on the value in moving past that 6 month, what I'll call is a hard line for some perspectives, so that parents that maybe not past that point yet, and they started their parenting journey expecting this all to be packaged up and done by 6 months.
I still get families reaching out to me who their pediatrician said they should not do night feeds, sometimes as early as 4 months, but 4, 5, 6 months. And then their baby starts waking more. And I'm like, well, do you think your baby could be hungry or thirsty? They're like, no. I'm like, well, I think you need to work with a different sleep coach then. Like fundamentally, it's not a good fit for me if you won't even consider reintroducing a feed, right? Like with a 7-month-old baby, right? We know a couple things, right? We know from research that a majority of older babies feed at night. But we also know from how lactation works that if you are somebody who wants to maintain a milk supply long term, those night feeds are really important, especially for the US when you're separated from your baby during the day because we don't have parental leave, right? So you're spending a lot of time away from your little one. And for some parents, those night feeds can be extra important because they might not respond as well to pumping, to maintain supply. But I think we sometimes overfocus on the food part and forget how many other things nursing is, right? Or even if we're talking about bottle feeding, how many things feeding with responsive, like love and connection is, regardless of the vehicle, right? Like, yes, it's calories, but it is also thirst. How many adults go 12 hours without drinking anything? Venture to say not most. But it's sensory, it's connection, it's co-regulation, and it's not just about calories and whether or not a baby will fall off the growth curve.
And that hits on such an important point because you're right. The focus is on the feeding piece and the calorie piece, let alone we don't even have to, well, we could delve into all the components that milk has and how it changes. Actually, I will. I'm going to circle back to that. But the idea of how much more is connected when we talk about connection and attachment, and we talk about just how much is happening in a baby's nervous system and their brain and their ability to hold on to a parent in their absence through the night. Goodness, like when you talk about that 18-month mark, when we get well past that 6-month mark, parents looking back at a 6-month-old, like looking back in time, realizing just how tiny and immature a 6-month-old baby is compared to their 12-month or 15-month or 18-month baby. So good. Okay. So that 6-month piece, it's so much more is going on there. When you talk about the 12-month mark and up, something does shift in terms of your support or expectation around whether feeds may or may not be valuable from a caloric point of view, but certainly those attachment pieces continue. What do you see in terms of the value? Like, what are all those layers? Let's dig into all the value beyond caloric and energy needs with feeds past 12 months.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is where the sensory and the regulation pieces are so important, and where the temperament of your kiddo and what role nursing plays for them makes such a difference, right? Because you can have a toddler that's likes to nurse, but isn't really is reliant on it.
Not everything is hinging on this. They have many other ways to connect, many other ways to
Yeah.
regulate compared to a younger baby.
And then you have the toddlers that are still very reliant on nursing, and even attempts to introduce other ways to connect. They're just not ready for them yet. And that's normal, right? It may not be what society likes us to tell us, but it is really normal. And so those two toddlers are going to have really different experiences. And those parents are going to have really different experiences of, can they set a nursing limit? What does that look like to set a nursing limit? Does it make more sense just to lean into nursing because it's going to get everyone back to sleep faster? And this is the age where I feel like a lot of people think night weaning is going to solve all their problems, but the age where it's more likely that the little one just keeps waking, and we're going to see less sleep consolidation afterwards. I don't know if there's ever been any research. Maybe you know, Heather, but I haven't seen any research that looks at night weaning toddlers and when it's more likely to help consolidate sleep and when it's less likely to. But experientially, I find that the younger toddlers, there's so many other reasons that they are waking that night weaning is less likely to help improve sleep and more likely just to get rid of your easiest resettling tool than older toddlers.
Yeah, the easiest one. Well, and the only research that I'm familiar with around toddlers and breastfeeding was about the weaning experience. So it wasn't whether it impacted sleep or not. It was what the parental experience was of weaning older toddlers. And it was a really interesting study looking at that experience for parents, especially in the context of this messaging around, a shift that happens for parents above the 12-month mark. And that's this pressure to push kiddos to be more independent, to be able to sleep in their own room without nursing through the night. But when you talk about just how it's almost like this push and pull for a lot of parents around thinking that they must give it up for sleep to get better or for life to get easier, but it is the easiest way. I wonder whether you can speak on that for the parents that are like, oh, it's like this push and pull of like, should we, if we're going to be good parents, we better just take this leadership role and run with it versus feeling like they're throwing in the towel when they just go back to the default of nursing and that struggle.
And this is where I think it's important to examine your why for night weaning, because I don't actually think parents should night wean just for sleep, or at least not just for sleep consolidation, because it's really a gamble on whether or not it makes a difference. And it's not like toddlers come with little signs. I'm the one that if you night wean, my sleep will consolidate. Or I'm the one you'll just wake just as much and I'll take you twice as long to get me to sleep. We don't know this ahead of time.
Yeah.
And so I think that parents should really be thinking about why is it feeling unsustainable? And is it outside pressure, right? That they should be night weaning? Is it they're actually experienced like nursing aversion or something along those lines? Is it that they felt like nursing was a barrier to their partner helping out? Because a lot of times that's a perceived barrier, not an actual barrier, if we have the right strategies in place. And I hear that a lot, like, oh, I can't until we wean, or I can't until we aren't nursing to sleep. And I'm like, why? I have never seen a breastfed toddler, a nursing toddler or nursing baby, that we can't make some headway. Maybe it's not going to look exactly like you want it to, and maybe it'll take a little longer, but it always makes some shifts. And thus we don't have to wait till kiddos are weaned to get, their other parent who is not nursing them involved. It just takes intention and it takes energy. And I think that's the thing is like all these things take energy. And so if you're feeling like you have no energy and you might not want a night wean, like you might want to do some easier things first. And so I feel like there's a lot of reasons we've had to examine, like, what do we want this to achieve? Is it realistic? And is it the most logical step that we should take right now?
Right. Well, and that storyline of this is the key. If I do this, all these other dominoes get knocked over and things will be better, when really what you're ending up doing is creating a lot of friction, I'll call it, like friction between what works well to get you easier sleep, to have your baby fall asleep more easily, to be sleeping longer, perhaps because they're satiated and they're getting what's in the milk that helps them keep calm and fall asleep. My mind now, though, is going to the 18-month-olds, because you said something really interesting about the language piece. And I would love to hear what your perspectives are on why language ends up being really key, because it's not something a lot of parents, I think, are aware of or even think of.
Yeah. So, sorry, something in my eye. So I feel like once we get toddlers who are more verbal, we open up a whole set of tools. Not that talking with like a 20-month-old or a 2-year-old is like talking to an adult, but we can start to help them process in a way that we can't with like a 12-month-old, right? And that's where we have so many great books on night weaning for kids, right? We can start to find language that they resonate with. We can start to practice nursing boundaries. And I always suggest practicing daytime nursing limits if your kiddo nurses enough during the day to do it before night weaning. So we practice at a time you can cope better. But we have the ability to help them sort of process and understand in a way that you don't have for a younger kiddo, like for a younger toddler. And I think especially when we're setting limits and we have a more intense, persistent toddler, that we know, like, almost no matter what we're going to do, there's going to be some big feelings around it, right? Like, it's just in general in life, right? Like, I have the blue cup and not the yellow cup, so there's big feelings, right? I said you can't nurse standing on your head, so there's big feelings. Like, really, no matter what, some of these they just have big feelings. That's just who they are. Having them understand, I think it helps them, but it also helps the parent to know that they can understand more. Like, I feel like it's regulating for the parent and it's easier on the toddler.
Well, this mention of big feelings, I feel like for many parents they're exhausted, they're trying to find that handhold through to something easier. Like they're climbing up this mountain, trying to figure out what's the path that they can take to get where they need to go. And I think for a lot of parents, when we hit that toddler stage, there's a certain level of parental fear around the big feelings.
Oh, yes.
Right? Like we have to avoid this meltdown at all costs. And therefore, we're just going to kind of put our heads in the sand and forget that the big feelings is part of this developmental unfolding that happens in the first 3 years. And whether it's the blue cup or the yellow cup, or whether it's nursing on your head, I was picturing that. I think about the times that my kids were doing practical acrobatics while nursing.
Like, toes up the nose and they're leaning over. You're like, what are you doing? Like, do you need to twist my body in that way? No, you don't.
Because I feel like it's early multitasking. I want to play and move my body and feet at the same time. But this fear, I think, is a really big barrier for parents because on two folds. Because one, they're fearful of the big feelings that come naturally, and a shift to accepting the big feelings that are coming from their toddler. lets go of all that resistance, right? You can find a different path. That's one route. But the other big feelings that parents are feeling a little bit uncomfortable around when parents have to take that leadership role, like being able to set limits, can be really anxiety provoking.
And I find it can sometimes be hardest for the most responsive parents of babies, especially if they did not have this modeled for them in their own upbringing. And usually that's because their big emotions as kids were not welcomed, right? They didn't have parents that held space for them, their emotions. And they're doing something different with their own little and shifting from like always kind of finding ways to reduce an infant's crying to the fact that as babies become toddlers, we set limits with love and with empathy that our toddlers don't always like. Right? And it's really obvious when you say, like, okay, your toddler wants to stick a fork in a like outlet and they have a huge big feelings that you won't let them electrocute themselves. Like that's really easy and obvious. But I mean, we set limits to keep a family running, right? And healthy. And yes, we should be mindful of what those limits are. So I'm not setting a million ones for no reason. But like part of that is learning that like you set the limit around the behavior and then you hold space and support whatever that response is. And I find parents really struggle with this transition as well.
And I think you're right. It's the most responsive parents that struggle with this because they're trying to be fully aware of and supportive of this natural big feelings toddler. They're trying to be responsive and empathetic. But at some point, that parental limit piece it's almost something that needs to be practiced. And I find that I'm always asking parents at this stage to look around for the things during the day, not just the fork in the outlet, because it becomes so crystal clear, or the seat in the car, the buckling babies up in the car seat. It's a non-decision. It's just the way it has to be. There are easier and harder ways to get them buckled in, but it still has to be done. I get parents to look for the ways that they're already setting limits that maybe they weren't paying attention to because they didn't do any work. They didn't even think about it. It was just in place. And knowing that they're already setting limits can sometimes open the door to realizing that they can set other limits that are going to be helpful for the family as a whole.
Yeah. And that shift from not being afraid of the emotions. Like, I think when you start thinking of it, like, it is responsive. It's still responsive, right? I feel like there's a lot of that, like, is it still responsive, even if my toddler gets upset? And it's like, well, if this is a limit you need to set and you're setting it with love, then yeah. So when it comes to nursing, like if a toddler is still nursing a lot during the day, then I will say, okay, if we're going to set nighttime nursing limits, I want you to feel comfortable setting a daytime nursing limit first, right? When you have better cope. And we don't have to go setting a million nursing limits, but like, let's make sure you at least are fitting that in some of the time. Not too much, because if you're not trying to wean totally, we don't want to set too many limits, but just for the practice of being able to set a limit. When your cope is better, their cope is better, you can get through it. You start to find some language that works for you, and it makes the nights easier.
Yeah. What might a daytime limit look like for that?
I mean, it depends on the family, but like, yes, I can nurse you when I'm done cleaning up the kitchen, right? Like saying no with a yes always works better, right? But rather than like dropping everything, interrupting your meal to nurse, yes, I will nurse you when I'm done eating, or we'll nurse when we get back to the car instead of nursing in the middle of the park if you don't want to nurse in the middle of the park. So like to find organic places that don't feel like a stretch, and I feel like you would have before kind of done it, but a little bit begrudgingly. Finding those places where you're going to feel that limit as a positive for you, like, I don't know that I really want to nurse in the middle of the park. Okay, well then let's nurse when we get back to the car.
That's a good place to start. Yeah. Yeah.
And just play around with that a little bit and see.
I like that. To actually have those examples to plant that seed for parents. What comes up for me is Lindsay Hookway's phrase of do the hardest thing at the easiest time. And when we're doing it at these natural junctions in the day where there's already a little bit of friction or resistance to doing it, but you have all your faculties intact. And during the day, it's not like 2 a.m. where you're resisting something that would actually get you what you want right now, which is more sleep.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it's like a parent thing and a kiddo thing. Like, kiddo needs to know that you can set a nursing limit and the world won't end.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to know that you can set a nursing limit and the world won't end, like that you can get through it. And I think that confidence is really important headed into nighttime.
Yeah.
And, that confidence spills over into, if you're confident when you're night weaning as the parent, this is the right thing for us to do, then your child picks up on that. If you're like, oh, I don't know. Oh, I'm scared of you crying. Oh, I don't know if I should be doing this. Like, I'm really kind of all over the place. Then they pick up on that. Like, oh, mommy doesn't feel, or my parent doesn't feel that this is safe, or they're feeling unsettled about this. And it just, especially for the highly sensitive kiddos, it just makes it harder.
Well, and that co-regulation piece kicks in then too, because a parent that's feeling dysregulated and full of fear, that, I mean, it's just sending so many signals. The baby might not know why it's feeling this way, but something doesn't feel good. What do they need to feel safe? They're going to they want the closeness, the nursing. So the very thing that you're trying to move gently away from ends up being heightened. The other part of the fear piece that I see is the fear of making it worse. So feeling like maybe this is a way through. They're looking forward to night weaning. They're looking forward, the parents, of not having nursing be part of the nighttime routine. But the fear that something that already is hard, sleep, is just going to get terrible. And for the parents that I've been working with this year, again, it's been this major theme, and they're moving into that 15 to 18-month range. But there's this huge block of, what if this makes it worse?
Yeah. I mean, I still think it comes back to why. Like, why are we night weaning right now? Because I find a lot of people pressure themselves into night weaning, or put a lot of unrealistic hopes on night weaning. And if we can unpack those, it's going to be better. Because if we're night weaning because the parent is done, then even if it makes it worse, it's still better because they are done nursing at night. Like, they're done. They're getting like aversion. They like really are at their point where they're like, I'm done. And either I'm done, I'm ready to wean altogether, or like, I'm done, I need to nurse less at night so that I can keep nursing, right, longer, which is, if that's their goal. And so when they're really doing it for themselves, yes, of course they want sleep to consolidate, but like, we're not putting it all on, this isn't all just about sleep. Or when we are night weaning to do sleep, we should have done a lot of other things first to support better sleep, right? So you're like, I've really done all the things I can to make sleep better. And then, night weaning could, or it could not. But what's like the exit strategy if this kiddo's really not ready for it? Also, like, you can test the waters. And if this kiddo is really not ready to night wean, then don't night wean right now. If you're not feeling like you have to night wean as the parent, like if that's not like coming from you being really, really done.
The theme is so important, because I think parents think they either walk through the doorway of this or not, but you can put your toe in. You can kind of test the water. How cold is it? Do you want to put your whole foot in? There's no valve that prevents you from stepping back again if you decide that, oh, he's sick, or there's teething, or there's another big change coming up, or a vacation. We have Christmas coming up. So as we're recording this, and I think, if parents know that they can just test the waters a little bit to see if this is the right time for everybody.
Or maybe they just have a way more intense reaction than you anticipated to something that's really gentle. And you're like, oh, I thought this would be gentle. Like, I thought this was a really kind of slower strategy. And they're having this huge reaction. You're like, I don't want to do this. Right? Like, this is them saying, I'm not ready.
Which you don't know. Again, you don't have that sticker on their forehead to say.
And you don't know till you try.
You don't know till you try. Yeah, that phrase I use a lot, because you just don't know. You don't know. And part of it is temperament and sensory, but so much of it is just the readiness piece overall. I wonder, you mentioned books, and I use books a lot for this process too. I'm curious what comes up for you as your top couple of picture books that allow parents to start scripting this out or picturing what it would look like or giving language for their toddlers to understand what shifts are going to be happening?
Oh, you want me to remember off the top of my head?
Not fair, is it?
That's not fair. I mean, Nurseries When the Sun Shines is a classic. There's Milky's in the Morning. Sally weans from night nursing.
Oh, that's a new one for me.
I do have a couple like just general weaning ones that sometimes I'll send parents who are like, this is part of like a slow and gradual, like fuller weaning process. What is it? My milk will go, my love can grow, or something like that.
Trying to think of that one. A family of mine used that and they found that book. It was a new one for me this year.
I have another one that's weaning specific, like broader weaning specific. I have a list, and
I'm going to have it in the show notes, the regulars, and I'm going to add that Susie one that you mentioned as well. I feel like picture books, and maybe your experience is similar, only part of it is for the kids. The other big chunk of it, half of it, is for the parents to have this vision of what it can look like by reading the book over and over again to their toddler.
And I think it's okay just to experience some language and see how your kiddo responds. And then you can sometimes tweak the language of a book. Like if it doesn't quite fit your family's situation or you find that they're not resonating, you can play around a little bit. You know, it's a good thing about reading to kids that aren't old enough to read yet. Like that you can kind of, experiment a bit with the words. But I think it just helps frame it in something that's more age appropriate and is a starting point for you to process, for them to process, give you some language to try out.
Yeah, because it's not an experience any of us remember going through, which makes it hard for us to have that storyline or narrative in our head of what this could look like if it's gentle and well-timed. Like your point around readiness and big transitions like this, they're often not easy, but there's easier when it's the right time and when you have all the pieces in place, partly based on understanding temperament and sensory needs and feeding needs, but also that attachment and maturation too.
Yeah, exactly.
When you look at what it actually looks like to implement some steps towards night weaning, where do parents even start? Where do we start to take that step forward to shape or to change the feeding at night?
I mean, I'm a big fan of habit stacking in the sense that we want to have really spent some time thinking about and having in use some other types of sensory comforting strategies, like right along with nursing, so that we've figured out like, oh, these are other things they respond well to and are used to having as part of their routines for soothing. Where you go from there, I feel like is so individual based on how your kiddo responds, right? Like some toddlers gradually reducing the length of a feed is really quite gentle and really lovely, right? Others, unlatching them before they're done is like you are murdering them. It's so terrible.
Yeah.
And
the world is ending.
And that may be a kiddo that you might want to comfort and try not to nurse and drop feeds once at a time. And then I'm sure you've had clients like this, Heather, especially, and this is where you really want them to be verbal, where like they are these really persistent kiddos and they can't handle inconsistency, meaning that we can't slowly drop feeds. And we really do need to do a lot of prep and drop feeds at once. I don't tend to go there unless we've tested out some of the more gradual strategies.
Likewise, I've had families for whom that has worked best, but it's not the first step that we take in testing this out.
And because it's stressful, right? It is the most stressful way. However, if you have a kiddo who is going to have big, intense responses, it can be less stressful overall than a slow and gradual strategy where every step is like hugely big reactions.
The little steps feel just as big. So getting it done in a shorter, with a bigger leap, it's not any harder than it would be. Well, and it's often easier.
Yeah, it's easier because it's less stress overall. And so some of these kiddos, it's like just wait if you can, and it will get a little bit easier. But some of these kiddos, it is who they are. They are persistent and they need to be really clear, like messaging. I don't know how else better to put it. They need it to be really
There's not
I
only
don't understand
great
why you can nurse it this week, but not at this week.
Yeah.
And, it's easier to test the waters and go, ooh, these lovely, gentle, gradual strategies aren't doing it for this kiddo versus jumping in with something that's really sort of, we know is going to be more stressful, though faster. It's kind of hard to backtrack from that. You really have to reset much more, I feel like.
When I
So,
think about the slow and steady approach too, and I'm always aware of letting parents know that whenever we make a change, we have to think more. We have to make more decisions. We have to, we're not going on autopilot, and that it is always okay to press the reset and backtrack or pause because it does take a lot of work. At a point in parenting where, and I'll just say the whole point in parenting where it's tough, like the first 3 years, there's a lot to know that making decisions takes palpable amount of energy. And so finding a way to make fewer decisions by making things really clear in your mind about how to step forward in this and when to feel like you can pause. And that pausing is not the same thing as throwing in the towel and giving up.
Yeah. And I've seen some families that do like a lovely mix, right? Like in the first half of the night, when sleep pressure is high, it's easy to gradually like drop feeds. And then those last few hours of the night, it's like they just get stuck. And, it means we kind of have to switch gears with how we approach the last bit of the night. But you've already brought the nursing down so much that even if you're then making a different strategy decision, it's a smaller portion of the night. It's such an individual process based on how the kiddo responds.
Well, it reminds me of a client this year who the goal was to take that high sleep pressure part of the night, that sleep up to midnight, and to be working on not nursing those first few hours of the night. And when we
time of night to work on it.
It is, but it was interesting to walk through this with her because at one point, after she decided that this was a good time, that getting over that fear around what would happen if she did try to make a change. And she said, "Oh, my baby slept until 1, so that doesn't count." I'm like, "Well, no, that's the whole point is if you didn't even have to do anything to not nurse for the first 3 hours, that is the win. You are progressing without having to do the work. It's not contingent on hard work. It's finding the easiest way through."
Yes, we don't have to have big, elaborate strategies and struggle to make progress if they just sleep more soundly and do it for us. Like, that is the best possible outcome.
Yeah, and a measure of moving forward isn't how hard you've worked. It's whether, there's more than just the parent involved. It's baby too. And if they're able to sleep past midnight without a feed, then that's showing you something. Is there something today that I haven't asked about that you think is part of this dialogue of night weaning that you think perhaps we don't talk enough about or that parents tend not to be aware of that you want to make sure we touch on today?
Yeah, I mean, I think the only thing we haven't really talked about is nursing to sleep versus night weaning and how those interconnect.
About that.
And I get a lot of questions about that when I'm working with families. I don't know what you see, Heather, but I see them as two different things in a lot of cases, in that most of the families that I help night wean who want to keep nursing to sleep are able to night wean and still nurse to sleep.
I
And
see
it's
the
like
same
this
thing.
really small number of toddlers, really small. And all the years I've been talking about night weaning with families and as like in lactation, but also as a sleep coach, really small number that we end up moving the feed, like all feeds away from sleep. Like maybe, I don't know, 2 or 3. It's like a really small number that it seemed like that step made a difference with a collaborative conversation with the parents that seemed worth a try. But I see it as not something they have to tackle unless they want to in my work with parents.
Yeah, no, I see that as well, Kim. I think of it as separate silos that parents think that they're related, but they're not as related, except in that small portion of kids that also tend to be the persistent ones where it's kind of a thing. But to know that if they're enjoying the bedtime routine and it allows bedtime to feel peaceful, highly connected before a long or the longest period of separation between baby and parent before the first wake up. That nighttime routine, even though eventually it won't include nursing, it can just be a lovely way to cap the day without having to have all that friction or, the work and the decision making they have to do around how to cap or limit this.
Yeah.
And I see the same thing with napping, that napping and bedtime and overnight are all 3 separate silos.
I often suggest leaving the nap nurse to last if families are weaning, because especially with toddlers, I mean, they have such a capability of skipping naps. If they don't get what they want, then I'm like, oh, I mean, I would leave it to last because they might just not nap, depending on how old they are.
Yeah. How badly do I want to not nurse during the day leading up to this nap? Am I willing to sacrifice the nap altogether?
Do something obnoxious like a car nap or, something that takes different kinds of higher energy, right, to get the nap. But
naps become so precarious because they aren't as crucial the older a baby gets. So I like to leave that alone too.
Yeah.
And I do have parents that absolutely want to change the nursing to sleep at bedtime.
Yes, me too.
And it's for different reasons than they want to wean overnight. It's more about the wiggle room to have a partner step in and do bedtime routine or to not need to be there.
Actually, that's a good other point. I talk about this with families all the time, right? That we don't have to stop nursing to sleep for partners to do bedtime, which I'm sure you also say.
Yes. Tell me more, though. Tell me more.
That we don't have to change that because babies are smart, right? They know they don't nurse off the parent that doesn't nurse them. They know they only nurse off the caregiver that does nurse them. So I think this is one of those where we, as parents and as a society, create barriers where there are not barriers around nursing, where we blame nursing. And I mean, yeah, sure, a really small baby that nurses a lot, whatever. Like, we have all sorts of reasons we might have imbalanced early parenting beyond just the biology of, parenting is never going to be 50-50 because both parents are not giving birth to the baby. So, the one individual baby. So, but, I find this is one where we really are creating an issue. And the issue is usually more that the whole family is more comfortable with nursing to sleep. And there's often very uneven comfort time with the baby towards the nursing parent. And so the parent who is not nursing is often getting less alone time with baby, less comfort time with baby because they just hand them off to the nursing parent because nursing is such a good comfort source, right? And therefore doesn't feel equipped to handle bedtime. And this isn't like a criticism, but it's like a pattern that it's so easy to fall into. And so then we need to start to course correct the pattern if that's something you want to put energy into. And we can do that without changing what the nursing parent is doing.
Yeah. Well, and the way I see this play out so often with parents that are wanting to separate that falling asleep portion of the nighttime is they just want some space between the nursing and the sleep. Layering in all those the habit stacking that you were talking about earlier, like the other comfort measures that the parent is starting to value more than that actual last little bit, like to have that little wedge of time between nursing and falling asleep. And it's a different style of the nighttime. You've got high sleep pressure. And when the readiness is there, it can be quite easy and lovely.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's when the books come in too. I think if you're wanting to incorporate reading a book as part of bedtime, it works best when your kiddo is old enough to enjoy the book you're reading or enjoy your voice as you're reading a story or even telling a story, and to have that space to fill it with other things.
And they'll often start doing it themselves, unlatching where they're fully asleep. And so it can be a really lovely time. I just think that we create this barrier that that's the only way to get a partner involved. When that's not necessarily the truth, right?
No.
We can create the space between nursing and sleep, and you should do it if that's what you want to do, of course, because that's a completely reasonable thing to want to do. And if you don't want to do it, but you want your partner to get more involved in bedtime, you can nurse all the way to sleep and put your energy into your partner getting more involved in bedtime, right? Those to me are two very separate things.
Yes, absolutely.
Of course, you can combine if you want, but you don't have to.
so many options that parents don't know are available to them.
Exactly.
Where can people find you if they're wanting to? Well, I want to be sure you mention your podcast because it's a lovely addition to anything that people are listening to within this realm of attachment-based, developmentally aware sleep and feeding. Where can they find you?
Yeah, so my podcast is the Responsive Family Sleep Podcast. And Heather, I think you were on it last January 2024, and then are going to be on it again probably sometime this winter since we are going to do another episode together, which is going to be awesome. And then my website is intuitiveparentingdc.com. And I'm on Instagram at intuitive_parenting_DC, but I don't like social media, so I'm there. My blog and my podcast are really more where I'm at.
Yeah. Well, and your podcast is absolutely lovely. You get some great guests on there too. The conversations that you're having on there and your solo episodes too are just fantastic for parents who are aligned with this. I want to thank you for your time. This was a long time coming. I knew I wanted you on and we finally made it happen. So thank you so much for your time, Kimberly. This was absolutely terrific.
Thanks so much for having me.
Bye for now, Kim. Thank you for joining me on this episode. I do hope that you found the information and perspectives in this podcast episode helpful to you as you navigate your baby's sleep development. Of course, this podcast provides general information and it isn't tailored to your family's reality or the specific needs of your baby. If you're concerned about your baby's sleep or health, be sure to reach out to your healthcare provider. If you're feeling exhausted and overwhelmed and you need a place to feel nurtured and reassured, you can find me on Instagram at familysleep.ca. Until next episode, look for the connections that support you and your baby.